Locating, so make sure my friend here is not coming.
All right, once again, for those joining us online, we welcome you today. Drop your name and PDH into the chat, and we'll make sure you get your certificates.
Good morning, everybody. We're going to get started here. We have a really great panel today that will give us some guidance on funding sources that are out there. We look at today's presentation as kind of a high level of what they have available to you. We've provided a speaker contact information list so that you'll be able to follow up with them after. They're not going to obviously go real in depth into the processes of applying for the grants, but they'll tell you what they're available for and what they'll cover and everything. So that is kind of the high level, but we wanted you to get them before you so that you can see what's going on. And, you know, all of us have a lot of work to do. And we hope obviously you will gain something out of it. There's a lot of funding sources here. They took their time to come. We're so appreciative that they all came out today to do this, and appreciative that we have such a big audience today. We added, had a contact kind of at the last minute. We were so grateful that we actually have EPA in the room. Nicole is here with us today. People online can't see her, but she's here just to kind of hear what's going on. And as she indicated to me, her colleague Maggie is online with us. And what she indicated to me today was, while they're not a direct funding source, they do fund Penvest and people, so that EPA is giving the money out. And, you know, there's a lot of new monies out there, so it'll be really good. With us today, we have somebody from the United States Department of Agriculture, Matthew. Thank you. We have Army Corps, Cassandra and Jennifer. Thank you. And from did that one from DEP, we have Christine and DCD Gregory. Penvest, our friend Dan, who a lot of you saw at the our annual conference. We have from DCNR, Celine, and our great friend here from Alcosan, Tim, who's provided us, we know a lot about his grants, but we want to remind you about those. And then ACCD, the Conservation District, we have Heather. She's online. I'm sorry. Thank you. So without further ado, we're going to get started here. And to be honest with you, I really don't know how we're going to do that, because you know me, Andy takes care of everything. So.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. Just to give a quick background to our panelists, since we're hoping this is a multi-directional dialogue, right? That, as we all know, especially the municipalities, Alcosan went into a consent decree with the EPA. That consent decree has trickled down to the state level and has been issued to the municipalities originally in a phase 1 consent order agreement in an interim, and now we are in phase 2. And the perception of the phase 1 was that it was really administrative. It was getting our ducks in a row. It was mapping and building and understanding the feasibility of solutions within our municipalities for controlling source water, for understanding our sewer systems. The phase 2 consent orders, which have now been signed by our entire region, are really the construction consent order agreements. And as a result, the municipalities represented in the room, our crowd online, the engineers, the managers, up and down the pay scale of these municipalities will be looking to determine how they are going to move into construction, sometimes in multiple areas across their municipalities. As they go through that transition, we have spent the last 2 years giving them a lot of the pieces and parts of the initial assessment, how they stand, where they stand on things we call the threshold and the gold line standard. And now they know specifically at individual meter sheds or individual meter points how their system is doing. And based on how it's doing, they are going to have to do projects that control the source above, around, at those POCs. And so those projects, we are now entering 2023, which will be the year of design for those projects. As they go through 2023, they're going to be collecting the last bit of data that they have so that they can know exactly what projects to put where. That list of projects for both the combined sewer systems as well as the sanitary will be due as of December of next year. And so that means we are going to construction in 2024, 25, and 26. And so that means that as the communities are evaluating what projects to put where, 2023 is the year of us all applying for as many third-party grants as we are capable of getting for us as a region. Our communities will be moving forward, hopefully, with additional funds in hand so that they are able to move into that construction phase smoothly, but also with additional resources to support. And so, as we know, an additional detail of importance, the combined sewer communities, they have an obligation to do a financial analysis of themselves and say, this is the stage and the processing we're capable of doing to get to the outcomes required by this order. But one of the most important lines in that order is must do with all due diligence, seek as many third-party additional funding sources to prove the financial capability of your community. So the combined sewer communities are sitting in the room today saying, you are the ones I'm going to be going to hopefully get additional funding, but also make sure that I did my very best to get as much money as possible to fix my system. And then on the other hand, we have our separate communities, and our separate communities were not given a financial capability assessment within their order, which means the separate sewer communities will be moving forward to fix their system, and they will not be able to make the argument that they cannot afford it. But as communities are looking and evaluating projects, looking and evaluating the multiple areas that they have issues with within their system, they are going to realize that these projects, as you all know, are going to be very expensive. A phenomenal amount of money is about to be spent. And so they need the third-party grant agencies and partnerships just as much, because those applications will be necessary for them to accomplish the mandates of the order. And so I hope that's a little bit of the who you're looking at, panelists. You're looking at a bunch of municipality representatives who are coming to you and us in this room to hopefully have a very intimate and thoughtful discussion about the next stages we have as a region. And so a few notes about how we'll move forward. We're going to give each agency 10 minutes to present, speak, discuss their current grant programs, what exists, how to apply, some things that they recommend, where to go. We have some worksheets that were distributed in the room. We also, hopefully you have those in your hands for those of you joining us as hybrid attendees. And so we're going to move through each agency. So at the end of their 10 minutes, if you would like to ask a quick question, we'll do that. But we're also going to be opening up at the end of the panel and making sure that we have plenty of time for questions, right? Because there are some interesting players in the room, and I'm really excited for you to hear the perspectives of how each of their grants through a very particular avenue can be opportunities for all of us, okay? So kicking off, let's have the USDA. We're going to have them kick us off and tell us a little bit about their funding programs.
Okay, great. Thanks, Annie. My name is Matt McKnight. I'm with USDA Rural Utility Service. My agency has been partnering with municipalities across the Commonwealth for over 50 years to help them improve their water, sewer, and storm water infrastructure. We get about $40 million a year for the state of Pennsylvania to spread around the Commonwealth, but don't allow that modest figure to deter you from applying with us, because we do have opportunities to go back to a national pool at several times throughout the year for additional funds. And if we did have an application that pointed very well and was ready to go, we would very likely be able to dip into those additional funds. We have loan and grant funds available. It is a needs-based program. So depending on your municipality's median household income, according to the US Census data, that would determine what interest rate profile your community would fall into. We have a poverty, intermediate, and market rate. Currently, our poverty rate is right at 2.25% over 40 years. We are the only agency at the time that can offer 40-year money. So that's something to keep in mind for folks that are looking to make sure that this project can fit into a tighter budget. We are actively seeking applications at this time. We do no longer have a waiting list of applicants. So don't hesitate to get your application in as soon as possible. It really is a first come, first serve basis. We have, of course, an environmental, an engineering, and then what I call a red tape paperwork aspect to our application process. The environmental and the engineering portions are pretty standard, but the rest of the application process, we have specialists such as myself assigned to each county across the Commonwealth to be the personal point of contact for anybody seeking to put together an application. As you came in, we had this piece of paper available up there to you. If you leave today with only one piece of paper from RUS, make it be this one. Based on this, you can determine what county your project's in and which point of contact to call up and begin working on getting that funding application going. Have any questions?
Any questions that want to jump in right now for the USDA? Not seeing any pop in online. And so, oh, yeah, please go ahead.
What would be like a priority project for your organization?
Just to repeat the question, was what would be a priority project for the question? Our mic's up here, just to
Sorry.
get her. No, that's fine.
Yeah.
So we do have a couple of different priority points that we assign to projects. Mostly this is a needs-based program, so the more poverty in the area, the more it's going to point. But if there's a health and sanitary situation in the community that the project is correcting, that will give it an additional bit of urgency.
Population requirement?
Correct. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that. Your community would have to have under 10,000 population to be eligible for this funding.
We did have a
Is there a
question come
funding
in
cycle?
online. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Is there a funding cycle, like, is it every year?
Right. We get replenished with funds every fiscal year. So October 1, we get the new SLID funding for the year. We get about 40 million to go around the state every year, but we get pooling dates throughout the year to go back to the federal trough, so to speak. So we really don't have deadlines that we hold applicants to. We ask you if you're ready to apply, let's get it started.
Question on the 10,000 population. Is that overall population of your community, or could it be a pocketed area of your community that is on the lower end of the economy?
So any community, any municipality with more than 10,000 people, we would not be able to do work in that and within those boundaries.
Thank you.
We had a question come in online. Is there a specific website that you can direct us to for that specific grant program?
We have those fact sheets that were included. There's two main programs that we're offering at this time. Our flagship water and waste disposal program. I believe that the website's listed on the fact sheet. And then there's an additional fact sheet there for our search grant program, which is available to very low income communities that are struggling to put together funds to do a technical report such as a 537 plan or other such technical reporting.
Any additional questions for those joining us online? Just as we do have an active speaker to the room, so you're welcome to come off mute if you would like to. Just as a note, I'll also check the volume because I said that, but sure we're good. Yes. super loud. All right. Perfect. All right, well, any other questions for the USDA? All right, well then, let's move into our speakers from the Army Corps. So if you want to jump up and let me get your PowerPoint up.
Hi, I'm Jen Cristobal from the Army Corps. I'll just start talking while we're waiting for our slides. I have quite a few. We're going to just go quickly through our programs. We have a number of programs. There is a sheet here that you should have all picked up. It's got sort of just the name of the program, a little bit of brief information, and then the contact person. If you're not sure, which you very well may not be, when you go through this, any of us will be able to kind of redirect. And there are definitely times where we can start to kind of develop a request for funding, and then it may shift to a different program. So that's sort of some things that we can work on internally. So don't feel like you need to figure these things out before you reach out to us. Next slide. Just kind of quickly, the Army Corps kind of manages the locks and dams, some big things on the rivers, but we also do have a charge to look at aquatic ecosystems in the region, flood risk management, and then we can also provide technical and engineering services. Next slide. And just kind of quickly, Pittsburgh District is very big. I know we're looking at Allegheny County here, but I wanted to just kind of share this in case anybody else has a kind of a bigger purview. We go all the way into New York, Ohio, and West Virginia. We're the upper Ohio watershed. Next slide. Okay, so in terms of our programs, the first one I want to talk about is our technical assistance and comprehensive planning. These ones are really kind of all things flood. So there may be some points where you're kind of past that. It's time to start doing construction. But under these programs, we can do some very targeted technical services. We can do some like, hey, I've got some flooding right here. Can you come do a small H&H model for us so we can figure out what to do? Or can you help us model something? Can you help us kind of figure out something with data? So there can be very kind of targeted technical services there. There are two programs that we can sort of use to do that. There's one that's 100% federal funding and one that has a 50% cost share. That's the kind of thing that we could kind of scope it out with you and figure out what the cost share might be, and then kind of figure out where the funding cycle, here kind of from the region, kind of where there's money and what's going on, and kind of help guide things. So that's something that's a little bit flexible there. Next slide. Additionally, under sort of that technical assistance and comprehensive planning, we can do kind of bigger watershed planning work. And that is sort of all things water. So that's where we can also kind of look more at stormwater, look at modeling storm, flooding measures, and kind of looking at how a construction project might impact things downstream or upstream, things like that. In Indiana County, we're helping them with their 167 stormwater management plan. So it's pretty broad what we can do there. That really largely the only way to do that one is going to be the program that has the 50-50 cost share. A lot of that cost share can be work in kind. So that's another way we can sort of figure out how can we count your hours. It's easier to hire your municipal engineer to do some things like that. So pretty flexible there. Next slide. Our next kind of batch of programs so those two programs I talked about earlier have no construction component. So those, at least from the Army Corps, would stop, and they would not necessarily roll into construction. You'd have to sort of come to a different program to roll into construction with our agency. These next programs I'm going to talk about do have a construction component, but we would also do a study and possibly some design and engineering in conjunction with it. So that would all be services we provide as part of the program. So 205 looks specifically at flood damage reduction. We did a big one in Sawmill Run. This has sort of a complicated cost share. We get some seed money to do really hard scoping, get the engineers out there, look at some measures, figure out what it's going to be. And then there's a cost share component to the study piece, and then there's a cost share component to the construction piece. So you do get some off ramps if you decide, hey, this doesn't make sense anymore. And really at no point, kind of all those off ramps, you're not obligated. So it kind of gives you some good touch points there. That'd be something that we would, again, kind of figure that out with you if you've got something. There are a couple programs that might fit things, and sometimes you can combine them with other kind of projects. Next slide. This is similar, section 206, aquatic ecosystem restoration, obviously focuses specifically on aquatic ecosystem. We do have a charge, I will say, kind of back up a little bit for all of these projects to look at additional benefits kind of beyond. So we look at like economic benefits, social benefits, things like that. But like largely these programs focus specifically kind of on what they focus on. But you'll see in Sawmill Run, we are able to, use this program to daylight and remove, a stream from the combined sewer system. So it can kind of meet, multiple goals. If we can combine that with aquatic ecosystem restoration and meet some other goal as well, happy to do that. Next slide. Section 14, emergency stream bank protection. So this is really, if you've got some public infrastructure, you've got a stream bank that's eroding, you can ask us to kind of come in and take a look. We can put in a request for funding to kind of stabilize the stream bank. There is a small and hopefully fast study associated with that. I will say, for any folks who've talked to us about this before, emergency at the Army Corps does not always equate to an emergency out in the real world. Sometimes it can take still a year or two, so you may still need to do some mitigation. Kind of look at an emergency that's coming, and so we can start requesting that funding, and hopefully by the time it becomes an emergency, we'll be ready to act. So certainly it's not something where we'd be able to send someone out like the next day. Send someone out soon to look at it, but that's another thing where there's a whole internal process for the money to come down. That is, again, there's a cost share component to that program as well. Next slide. This is really something that's probably out of the purview of each individual municipality, but I want to kind of throw it up here. This is something that's really kind of a more regional study. So these general investigations do require authorization from Congress. They tend to be multiple millions of dollars. They require cost share from like a larger local sponsor. But, if at some point this group was looking at something and they said, hey, we've all got a bigger problem, it's crossing municipal boundaries, and we want to kind of come talk to the Army Corps about like, how can we take a bigger, harder look at this? They tend to take years to get funded. They tend to then take years to get executed. It does lead to construction though at the end of that. So, you're looking at probably decades, right? Until you start talking about it, till it gets finished, and then it goes into construction. We have these going on in other parts of the country. Some of them were leading up Pittsburgh district. So I think we do have some ability to kind of help conceptualize what they might be. So that might be a kind of a larger conversation, but not for any particular municipality here. Next slide.
All right, so we'll talk about environmental infrastructure. Allegheny County is covered by section 219 and section 313. And that's of the Water Resource Development Act, WRDA. So of the 1992 Water Resource Development Act, if you look up, that's the section that it's referencing. These are 75, 25% federal cost shares. So these types of projects cover wastewater, drinking water, new wells. We do have a fact sheet in there that has some of a list of our current projects that we're working on. One of them being Alcosan. We're putting in a grit chamber. Yeah, so there, and then we also have a website at the top that shows a link to our programs on there. But it's a 75-25. So 75% is covered by the federal government, 25% is covered by the sponsor being the municipality. The process goes where you submit a letter of intent to the Army Corps of Engineers, and it gets entered into an environmental database. And if you have any congressional support, you can include those letters or any other, if you have any consent decrees, reference that. These types of projects usually range between $1 to $3 million, but there's no set limit. And then the way these get funded is they get funded annually through the WRDA bill. So they'll get earmarked by a congressman, either by a project type or a specific project itself. So engage your elected officials if you have any specific projects you are looking at to have covered by this. The good thing about these programs is that they can go back to 6 years from the signing of the agreement for past projects. So if you have something that was constructed 3 years ago, you can have reimbursement. And these projects are reimbursement projects. So if you have a a $2 million or a $1 million bill, we would pay $750,000. Then you'd pay the $250,000, and all the way up until the funds get met. We receive these letter of intents on a rolling basis, so you just go ahead and email them to us. We do have a template. I have not provided that in here, but I can give you my email information, which is also the packet if you want me to provide that to you, if I can provide any other supporting information to help you get through that process. So 313's 15 counties in Allegheny, including Allegheny, and Section 219 is only Allegheny. Section 219 was tapped out for funds, but maybe have additional funding coming up in the next WRDA bill. And then 313 still has 80 million, I think, left. And we, like this past year, we got 6 million of that to spread out. So I think that's about it for me. Did you have any other slides?
Yep, I have one more slide. I'll say Cassie's programs, the 219 and 313 are the only ones that are reimbursement type programs that we talked about. All of the other ones would be kind of directly executed or contracted by the Army Corps. So largely we would come in and do that work ourselves with in-house staff, except for construction, in which case we would contract that construction directly. And so for cost share, come in the form of payment to the Army Corps. Local governments and nonprofits can request assistance. We can't provide any assistance directly to private landowners. We do get inquiries from time to time. So I just encourage folks to kind of work through the municipality. So most programs do require a cost share outside of the 219 and 313. So that would be essentially writing a check to the Army Corps. There are options for work in kind, like I said, and sometimes there are options where we can say, hey, you may get a little bit further if you want to say contract out some piece of this project. So some piece of the design and engineering, use your municipal engineer, use a consultant. So that's definitely something that we would work through in that process, kind of try to drive down that cost of the actual cost of the cost share as much as we can. And again, like the 219 and 313, the requests for assistance are all considered on a rolling basis. There are no formal applications, so you just start the discussion by kind of emailing us or calling us, and then we prepare the funding packet. So we would prepare sort of a scope of work with you, look at it with you, but we would kind of prepare the final packet and push it up for funding in our, through our regional leadership. And they're evaluated on all sorts of criteria, including our project execution internally and things like that. Plus each program has priorities. Each region will have priorities. No sort of blanket statements there in terms of what priorities would be. So I'd say if you think you've got something, just go ahead and email us, and and we can help advise you, how can we make this a stronger application, or how can we kind of get this pushed forward. That's it. Any questions?
Do you fund any stream bank restoration for sediment phosphorus removal?
That wouldn't be under ours because it's environmental infrastructure. Would 14?
No, so section 14 would really only be for the stream bank erosion. I don't think I've got anything that I can come and remove sediment.
Yes, I can confirm that.
Mary Ellen can confirm that.
We have a situation where the company has to.
Can you, I'm sorry, I'm getting over a cold. And
Yeah, sorry, I was foreign accent, I'm sorry about that. So we have a situation where the capacity of the street management.
Mhm.
Problem. Sometimes when there's a rain. Those. like
Yes.
trailers, Stuff like that. Are the funding resources in, federal.
Definitely not general investigations. I mean, maybe there may be some way to do it through a 205.
Question to the people online.
Oh, yes, sorry. So the question was again about kind of, the person asking the question asked about kind of sediment removal, and he's got kind of his capacity reduction in his stream, and he's got all kinds of, debris, sometimes boats, in there after probably rain events. And, whether or not we have programs that could help remove that. I'm wondering if through the 205, we could do that. So that is normally more like coming in and helping figure out how to, do non-structural things like remove properties from the floodplain or remove things that are getting flooded from the floodplain or build flood walls, or build levees. But through that program, maybe we could do some, do some sediment removal once we've sort of determined that that's the source of the flooding.
Yeah, there is also street bank restoration.
Mhm.
With that. So
Yeah. I would say just send us an email and we will figure that out.
If I could just jump in, Greg Welker, DCED. We actually have a flood mitigation program, which is funded through impact fees collected from the Marcellus shale industry. Sediment removal, stream bank restoration, things of that nature are projects that we can fund through that program. And we open that program on February 1st on an annual basis.
is there a, cost share by that?
It's 85-15, so 85% grant, 15% cash match.
Okay.
And we can actually use engineering costs for up to 1 year prior to count towards that match.
Is there a cost not to exceed for engineering design?
It's a minimum project cost of $50,000, maximum grant of $500,000. The grant for this type of project, we would not exceed 10% of the grant funds going towards engineering. So anything above and beyond that would have to be used towards the match. It would be paid out of your pocket.
Your grants. It's good.
Yeah, so our cost share, so for the 219 and 313, that's reimbursable, right? So that's the Army Corps sort of reimbursing you for your project costs. For all the other programs, the cost share is upfront. So the local cost share would actually need to come sort of in the form of a check to the Army Corps so that we could then use those funds to execute our work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I actually have a question.
Mhm.
So, something that is coming up a lot is that we have lots of flooding in our region. And that flooding sometimes looks like sanitary sewer overflows and, manhole popping. And because of the amount of streams, sometimes we have joining our sanitary lines and even in combined areas. So do you have a specific definition of flooding? And does it have to be riverine flooding? Is it allowed to be surface level flooding? And are there any parameters? Because some of your flood programs are really interesting. Just can they apply to those specificness?
So we can look at kind of overland flooding and we can look at kind of storm sewer overflows. So there's really kind of no restrictions there. So if you've got a culvert that's overtopping or you've got manholes blowing off, we can look at all of that, or out of bank flooding or sort of the whole combination of all of that. When you're involving your underground sewer system in that study, the data needs increase exponentially. So we end up needing a lot more survey work, or we're asking you for a lot more data because we're looking for pipe sizes and a lot more survey work around, inlets and outfalls. So the price of those can go up, and so the cost share of those can go up. But we can certainly do it, and we do try to take as much data as you've got and like drive down that like additional data we need to gather as much as we can. But definitely, yeah, all kind, no definition of flooding. We can look at any kind of flooding.
That does include in sanitary soil road.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have, population aspects or economic aspects for getting the grant?
No, so anyone in the Pittsburgh district, is automatically eligible to come talk to us about, you know, what they want to do. We have, I think we have programs that are probably still in refinement around environmental justice in low-income communities. Those have really not been well defined yet. There's a lot of data calls about like what low-income communities we're talking to and like how to better serve these communities. And we're all here on the ground saying, well, just change the cost share requirements and we can do that really easily, quite frankly. So none of that is sort of set. So that's something that I expect to be sort of shifting over the next year, couple years. That may not help the immediate kind of, you know, ask here, but definitely something that I expect to see additional guidance on and hopefully just some more money put towards it.
And if I could add into that, if you're looking for the 313 or 219, oh, and the question was regarding population for these requests for the grants. If you put in your letter of intent that you have a municipality of like 8,000 people or 200,000 people, it won't, you know, make you qualify or not qualify, but depending on how the earmarks come in, they may come in for us to select projects with a certain amount of money for rural, underserved, low populations. And then that information that's presented in that letter of intent, we can, you know, say this project would, that has a population of 10,000 in a rural area would have precedence under that specific earmark over one with 300,000 people with a higher income level. So if you were to put that information in there, that could go through our selecting process, depending on how the earmarks presented.
There's only one comment that came in online, and I believe it was based on the previous discussion around flooding. And it was a direction to a link to the DEP and a discussion about how the Western PA Coalition for Abandoned Mine Reclamation can assist in this. And then also highlighting the fact that we'll hear from the Conservation District in a little bit. And so some of these programs do have, you know, overlaps, and also just that means we have more partners to work with at every turn. So that's all the questions. Any other online questions for the Army Corps? All right, not seeing any come in and not seeing any in the room. Let's switch gears and move over to the DEP, and we'll have the DEP talk about some of their programs. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm Chris Phillips. I'm with the DEP. I'm part of the now the newly formed Bureau of Watershed Restoration and Non-Point Source Management. And I manage the Growing Greener grants and also the EPA's Section 319 Non-Point Source Management grants come into our program. If you applied for a grant last year, we are expecting an announcement if you were awarded the end of this month. The last grant cycle, we had 165 Growing Greener applications with a request of $66 million. We only had about $17 million statewide to disperse. In our region, we had about 35 grants. So it is, you know, sort of a competitive process. So, you know, I encourage you to reach out to me early so we can discuss your potential project and help you fine tune your need, so that gives you the best advantage for your application. The Growing Greener grant last application process in Section 319 opened around Earth Day last year and closed around the June 24th, and I expect that to be about the same time frame this year. We are looking at some changes to the grant application process. So in terms of the narrative and you're documenting the need for your grant. But that won't be available to you until the grant application opens in around Earth Day. And one of the changes I know that we're discussing is a maximum cap on funding, so please pay attention for that. That hasn't been identified yet. So tips for you to maximize your application is to make sure you have your match in place, your match letters from your partners. So with Growing Greener and section 319, I believe they're both a 15% match. But if you can exceed that, that scores better in our scoring rubric of your application. And to avoid lump sum cost estimates in your task and deliverable budget worksheets if you've applied for those. Last year, they had a webinar on the Clean Water Academy for new applicants. So that probably, I'm assuming that will be provided again this year. That won't be until they announce all the changes in the application opens. Again, I'm happy to meet with you, and that's sort of a requirement in the application to meet with me or have a phone conversation with me by early June, so we can go over your application. I know many of you are going to be interested in the Act 167 stormwater management planning. Unfortunately, that information hasn't been made available to us yet, but we're anticipating that information to come out the 15th of this month. So hopefully we can start disseminating what that might mean for municipalities after that. This year, I think there was a quick reference to that. AMD set aside grants are no longer part of the Growing Greener Grants Plus program. That's going to be through BAMR. However, if you have AMD discharges prior to 1977, the SMACRA law or SMACRA Act, that still can come through the Growing Greener program. That's all I have right now until we get some more information available. Any questions?
Questions for the DEP? We did have a question come in online. They were just wanting to make sure that we were distributing contact information for all the panelists. Yes, hopefully yesterday you got a contact list, but we're also happy to make sure everyone has that, which includes emails and web addresses. And then I had a question for the DEP in the fact that one of the specific line items of the consent order agreement is source reduction and control. And so Growing Greener, often it looks like it highlights the idea of growing green infrastructure projects and how those overlap very directly with source control in some cases. And so if you could just highlight maybe the focus areas of Growing Greener, like what types of projects get funded, maybe some examples.
So some of the projects, and I've only been there a year, but the ones that I currently manage and the applications I reviewed, they did involve stormwater infiltration and retention or detention type projects. I think that's what you're asking.
Yes, yes.
And which included retrofits to infiltration basins, a variety of rain gardens, stormwater impermeable pavers. And I think you had asked about stream bank restoration projects, and that's different from your question,
Yeah.
but that we do, and our projects do involve stream bank restoration.
Hitting on the importance of stream bank restoration, there's going to be a lot of people digging up a lot of things in the next 4 years. And so as we are actively digging up pipes, and where do our system run by gravity often go? They run along the historical stream banks and or active stream banks. We a lot of times in this region have a sanitary sewer, sometimes actively sitting in a creek or beside a creek or near a creek. And so as you're evaluating the replacements, the linings, the construction, the modification of those sanitary lines, there are opportunities for you to meet maybe some of your other requirements, names not to be named here, but as you're doing stream bank restoration and modifications to pipes adjacent, think about the collaboration that might be possible to meet a whole bunch of different parameters, not only just for the benefit of the stream, but for the benefit of and other things that might be happening in your communities as you're doing. it. So just highlight to that where Growing Greener. Any questions? I don't see any more online. Any in the room for the DEP?
So I want to also
Sure.
point out, I came from the permitting side before coming to Growing Greener, and just to encourage you to start your permitting process and plan for that to take some period of time, so that you can factor that into your project design, your overall goals for getting the project completed.
All right, thank you so much, DEP. So let's switch gears. I'm going to bring up the PowerPoint presentation for the DCED, and that's who we'll have next. You want to introduce yourself and get started? I'll have it up here in just a second.
All right, I'm gonna stand up. I like to walk around and talk with my hands, so excuse me as I move about the room. So I'm Greg Welker, DCD. I'm the director of the CFA Programs Division, CFA being the Commonwealth Financing Authority. I'm gonna kind of jump around a bit in the presentation for the sake of time, because the two programs I am going to talk about are essentially the same program in terms of who's eligible to apply and what projects are eligible. So the two programs that we currently have open and are accepting applications through December 21st are our COVID-19 ARPA PA Small Water and Sewer Program and the COVID-19 ARPA H2O PA Program. Next slide. So as I said, I'm kind of going to consolidate things. For both programs, who's eligible to apply? Municipalities and municipal authorities are eligible to apply for projects that they own and maintain. Next slide. That's okay. So projects that are eligible, first for the Small Water and Sewer Program, we have to have a minimum project cost of $30,000. There were some legislative changes here in the past couple of years, so we can do a grant of up to $500,000. So if you have a $600,000 project, you can still apply for small water and sewer funding. As I mentioned, municipality or municipal authority has to own and maintain their project, but those eligible systems are water supply systems, sanitary sewer systems, and stormwater systems. So when I say stormwater systems, we're talking traditional gray infrastructure, curbing, inlets, piping, as well as green infrastructure. So your bioretention basins, riparian buffers, bioswales, things of that nature. Stormwater management systems, as we're interpreting them to be for these particular sets of programs, are any from, the site of collection to the discharge point. So stream restoration, things of that nature would not necessarily be eligible under this program. But as I mentioned, we do have some other programs that are available that could potentially fund those projects. For H2OPA, same set of projects. It's a minimum project cost of $500,000. So essentially where small water and sewer ends, H2OPA starts. And there's a maximum grant of $20 million under that program. The matching requirements for these programs, small water and sewer, it's 85-15. So 85% coming from the grant, 15% coming from other sources. And that can be any other source as long as it's secured. We will accept offer letters from USDA or Penvest, some indication that the funding has been approved, not necessarily closed. We accept term sheets. We accept just straight commitment of matching funds that are substantiated with audited financials or account statements, something to show that the funds are there to move forward with the project if the approved level of funding, or if the requested level of funding is approved. Next slide. Oh, and sorry, I will take a step back here. So the matching requirements for H2OPA, again, cash match, same sources of funds are eligible as long as they're secured. And it's a 2-to-1 grant to match ratio. The guidelines have it worded a little funky. It's 50% of the award. So what that means is for every $2 of grant that we approve, you're required to commit $1 of matching funds. Project costs that we can cover, construction, the acquisition of land or easements, rights of ways that are necessary to construct an eligible project, fixed equipment. I'm going to put an emphasis on fixed. So we're talking about those pieces of equipment, most likely that are going to be in a pump station or a treatment facility. Engineering, we can use up to 10% of the grant to reimburse engineering costs, inspection costs, permitting, and administrative costs. Administrative costs would be your legal costs, your cost to put the project out to bid, documented staff time putting together contracts or bid documents or preparing payment requests. We can only commit 2% of the grant for those administrative costs. I'm gonna have you skip ahead a little bit. So we're just gonna jump through everything we've already talked about. Okay. So these two programs are reimbursement based. So thinking back to those cost share requirements, I'm going to use PA Small Water and Sewer because it's a little easier. If you submit to us $100,000 of invoices, we'll reimburse you at a rate of 85%. So $100,000, we're cutting a check, we're sending a wire for $85,000. That's our way of ensuring that that match component is met throughout the project. So we do have a list of items that we'll have you submit with those payment requests. If you're successful in your request for funds, we will send out a payment request form and instructions, which will have a detailed list of those items. But they generally include invoices, proof of competitive procurement, such as public advertisements, contracts, and all the necessary requirements that are set forth in the grant agreement. Next slide.
Sorry.
That's okay. So some of you may have applied for these programs in the past. As I mentioned at the beginning, these are the COVID-19 ARPA version of these programs because we've been given combined $320 million of federal ARPA funds to designate towards these type of projects. So we are accepting those applications through December 21st, as I mentioned. Because they are ARPA funds, there are a few things that we wanted to highlight. First, the project can't start prior to approval. Best guess at this point is maybe July, depending on the number of applications that come in and a number of other factors could be pushed back, but July would be the earliest we would be expecting those awards. Because they're ARPA funds, there is an expiration date on when we can distribute those funds. So the current deadline is December 31st of 2026. So our grant periods are going to run through the end of September of 2026 to give ourselves and our grantees a little bit of time to make sure that we dot the I's and cross all the T's, get all the necessary documentation in to make sure that you folks can reap all of those grant awards that you potentially are able to receive before we have to ship those funds back to the U.S. Treasury. So we only have until December 31st to get that done. Because it's federal funding, federal guidance indicates that your projects have to align to a single expenditure category. We do have a list of the expenditure categories at the end of our guidelines. Most of them are pretty self-explanatory. So we have centralized wastewater treatment. That would be your improvements at a treatment facility, wastewater treatment plant. We have the collection and conveyance of that sewer system, which would include the piping and the pump stations. On the flip side, we have water treatment facilities, transportation and distribution of that water supply. But if you have a project and you're not quite sure what category it's going to fit in, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to kind of talk through that with you. But I highlight those because there are a number of projects that are out there where you may be able to dig one trench and do a water line and a sewer line. Unfortunately, you would have to submit 2 applications if you're looking to do both types of infrastructure. Now, that being said, chances that you get both, you could, but you could also get neither. So when you submit those applications, I would encourage you to include the excavation and repair of those disturbed areas in both applications to make sure you're covered. Because it's federal funding, we do have a FAFATA form that you're required to submit. We've gotten a lot of questions over the last week or two about entities that have not gotten their UEIs. It's a unique unique entity identifier. It's replacing the DUNS number at the federal level. If you previously had DUNS, you probably already got a UEI. But if not, we're encouraging you to apply as soon as possible. I will tell you, if you haven't started the application process, you're not going to have it by the deadline. That being the case, we will have you upload an explanation. We've applied for our UEI number. When we receive that, we'll submit the completed FAFATA form, and we'll have you send that to our resource account, or if it takes a little longer and your analyst that's assigned to your project has reached out to you, you can send it directly to them. We also are going to have reporting requirements. We do have a template which summarizes the information that we're going to be requesting from you on a quarterly basis through the end of the reporting period, which is the end of 2026. Most of that information is going to be collected in that first report. From there, it's really just updates on how much have you completed of the project, how much of your funds have you drawn down. So I know with federal funding, typically Davis-Bacon rates apply. Davis-Bacon rates were specifically waived for projects under $10 million for ARPA funds. So just want to throw out that we're just going to blanket apply Pennsylvania prevailing wage rates. Applications, as I said, are open. We have a link here to our online application system. Everything is 100% electronic, including the application fee, which is $100 per application, and that can be paid by credit card, debit card, or electronic check. Have my contact information here, but at this point, I'll open the floor for any questions.
Hey, Greg, Joe Day from Alcosan. First, thank you for answering all my questions. I appreciate it. I blasted Greg with like 4 emails yesterday and he got right back to me. You said that December 21st is the deadline.
Yes.
For this cycle. Is there going to be future cycles until that money is expended?
Great question. My assumption is probably not, because those funds have to be designated before the end of 2024. Is it possible? Yes, but there's just not a whole lot of time to get those additional rounds committed. If there's additional rounds of these 2 programs, I would think that we're probably going to go back to state funded.
That was my second.
Yeah. So there's no designated revenue source for these 2 programs. We rely on legislative appropriations. So it's not something that we have necessarily on an annual basis. I like to say that pre-COVID, we were averaging funding about every other year for the Pennsylvania Small Water and Sewer System, sewer program, sorry. H2OPA, because of this high ceiling on that, generally there's a much more significant level of investment that's required to do those projects. We did a round of funding in conjunction with the last round of small water and sewer, but we only had about $24 million in funding available. And we're talking about a maximum grant of $20 million. It's really not a lot of high ticket price items that we can cover. So prior to that, it had been about a decade before that program had been opened competitively.
You
said you cover stream restoration projects?
Not under this program specifically, but we do have a couple of programs that overlap. And they actually are both funded through the Act 13 Marcellus Shale impact fees. We open those programs annually, February 1st through May 31st. Typically aim for an award in September. So I mentioned the flood mitigation program. You know, that's any project that mitigates a flood risk. So, you know, the project that was mentioned earlier about, you know, the sediment removal, debris removal to restore the capacity of that stream, eligible under the flood mitigation program, and we could do the stream bank restoration and stabilization along with that. We also have our watershed restoration and protection program, which is projects that improve the overall quality of health of the streams within that watershed. So that would include your stream bank restoration, your riparian buffers, your agricultural and urban BMPs to prevent sediment and pollutants from entering the watershed. So that's where we kind of get into that overlap of water and sewer and stormwater infrastructure versus these flood mitigation and watershed projects. There's a little bit of overlap between the two.
Okay, getting into a legal aspect of the stream. The stream, basically, most streams are either owned by a private property owner, passes through his property.
Mhm.
Or maybe the border or the survey line is
Yep.
between two properties. How do you cover that ownership under the program?
So with the small water and sewer and the H2OPA programs, as I mentioned, those projects have to be owned and maintained by an eligible applicant, being a municipality or a municipal authority. With the watershed restoration protection program and the flood mitigation program, we can get consent from the owners. They can either generate an easement or they can, I think with the watershed restoration and protection program, I'm going to shorten that to watershed and flood, if that's okay with everybody. It's just a lot. So with the watershed, we get a landowner consent letter, and that basically just kind of tells us, okay, this applicant can go in and do this project. It spells out who's responsible for the long-term ownership and maintenance. It does not have to be the applicant. We've done a number of projects. I'll say probably specifically within residential developments where, you know, these developments that were built in the 70s and 80s, there were no stormwater requirements, but now they're trying to do improvements, and in order to get the permitting, they have to incorporate these stormwater projects. And so we have these detention basins, these rain guards that are going in to help manage that stormwater within those communities. And so we'll have perhaps the municipality come in or a nonprofit come in on behalf of maybe an HOA for that development, where the private property owners or the HOA would be responsible for the long-term ownership and maintenance of that BM.
Yeah, we have a emergency sewer repair situation on a hill bank, slope. If we want to have a geotechnical engineer's investigation to propose the most feasible solution.
Mhm.
My question is, in order to get a cost estimate, it could vary differently, very vastly depending on the solution. This could be a simple fix. You know, replacing this existing sewer with new one and some slope stabilization, or you have to do additional boring, which could be more expensive.
Mhm.
So how to present two cost estimates, assuming a simple solution. But right now, we don't know what we're going to want to have a geotechnical. Site.
Sure. So
Let me repeat the question real fast for those joining us online. So the question is, they're going into a project with a lot of unknowns.
Right.
They're doing geoanalysis of a hillside and determining whether or not and how, what project would be necessary. It could be a small restoration. It could be a large restoration. So how can cost estimates be submitted in those kind of unknown situations? Sorry, just for you online.
So we do have to have a defined project scope. So when we're looking at a project that potentially there's two solutions, for the sake of submitting the application, the end result I'm assuming is going to be the same, right? We're stabilizing the stream bank. Was it a replacement of that?
Replacement of sewer on it.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Yeah, so a replacement of some sewer piping. So we know what the end result's gonna be. It's just a question of how do we get there? So we would ask the applicant to make a call in the beginning, just to give us an idea of, okay, this is probably what we're looking at in terms of cost. This is what the maximum cost of that project is going to be. So that's what we're coming in for. That's what we're presenting as the project. That's going to be the scope of work. If the project secures funding and you're able to actually do it with a lesser scope, great. You know, I know you mentioned that was an emergency situation. I just want to highlight, so with all the programs that I've mentioned so far, we cannot start the projects until after approval. So, you know, with the watershed and flood programs, we can do soft costs, but we can't start construction or take ownership of any equipment prior to the approval of funds. So if you have a situation where you have to start construction, unfortunately, we do not have a waiver of retroactivity, and that project would be deemed ineligible for funding.
I mean, we did a temporary fix.
Yeah.
It's working now, so.
Yep.
Yeah,
Got
we're looking for a permanent solution.
Got it. Okay.
Any other questions from our attendees online? I'm not seeing any in the chat. Anyone? Oh, go ahead.
For the small water, you mentioned that there's a 15% match
Mhm.
funding side of it and 85% reimbursable.
Mhm.
cost. So it seemed to me that if a municipality, if we had a $200,000 project, say, municipality would need to budget, say, $200,000 for that project. And they would expend it, get through that process and get reimbursed. Is it possible to pass through invoices from, like, say, get an invoice from a contractor and rather than have the municipality pay it directly, pass that invoice through to your organization and have the organization pay that contractor directly?
Sure, great question. So the question that came in was, in a situation, because our grants are reimbursement based, so we need to see invoices in order to pay out grant funds. Is there a scenario where the invoices can be submitted to DCED and DCED pays the third-party vendors directly? Unfortunately not. We can only disperse funds to the grantee. That being said, reimbursement based, we just need to see the invoices. We don't need to necessarily see that they've been paid upfront. We'll ask for that information to make sure that the funds have been spent according to the grant and that you spent the funds on what you said you were spending the funds on. But we just need to see that the cost was incurred. So if you're able to pay the invoices, great. We'll just reimburse you and call it a day. If it's something where, you know, you're in a situation where we don't have the funds on hand to pay these invoices, we would encourage you to submit those and kind of give us a heads up that, you know, we do need these funds to pay these invoices. So that way we can make sure that we do a thorough review. We make sure that we have absolutely everything we need in a timely manner, so that you can pay those invoices. Because I know a lot of those vendors will give you like a 30-day term to pay that before, you know, some penalties might start accruing. So if you find yourself in that situation, please reach out to us in a scenario where you've secured a grant award, and we can talk about the options there to try and get those funds expedited.
The application process, I believe the municipality has to submit a pass resolution.
Yes.
The question, I guess, is if that resolution has not been passed, can we apply and then submit that after, similar to the UDI?
Yeah, so the question came in, if we haven't passed a resolution and are not going to pass one before the deadline, can we still submit? Yes, we would have you submit a copy of the draft resolution. And same thing, we would have you send a copy of the passed and signed resolution to either our resource account or to the assigned analyst.
Mentioned funding for a stormwater management. If I'm doing a source separation project, that you find that part of that is going to be a restaurant, stormwater management program. Is that eligible?
So I am gonna ask you to kind of elaborate on what you do mean.
So I'm taking my storm sewer out
Yeah.
of my sanitary sewer.
Right.
Now I can't dump it just to the open channel. I gotta create a stormwater. connection.
Yeah.
That would be eligible.
So let me ask how that project is framed. So are you constructing a new storm sewer system?
Yes.
Or are you constructing a sanitary sewer system and abandoning the existing system? And that will be the de facto stormwater system,
Constructing a new.
storm sewer. Okay, so, yes, we could do the storm sewer and, the detention or retention, area, as one project.
And when you say start of construction, that physical work, what if I bid the project to be prepared to, as soon as I get the grant, bidding process takes several months. And I don't want to eat
Yep.
that up in my construction.
Great question. So, the question was, can we bid out a project prior to approval? The answer is yes, we prefer not to see an executed contract until after approval. We recognize that, we don't live in an ideal world, so there are going to be situations where, you do execute those contracts prior to approval. If you could find a contractor who's willing to work with you and do this, we would ask that you build in a notice to proceed provision. So even though the project is bid and the contract is executed, we need that notice to proceed to trigger the start of work. And that notice to proceed would kind of be our justification to show this project did not get green lighted until after approval.
One last question. Talk about flood mitigation. We talked before. Does flood mitigation include sanitary sewer overflows that are causing flood?
We can potentially look at those. I think we would need to understand exactly how they were going to be addressed to make a determination as to whether or not we would have an eligible project or not. But we can do, as I said, the flood mitigation program, where the goal there is to mitigate flood risks. So, if it's an overflow, maybe that's a side benefit. We're eliminating a sanitary sewer overflow or a CSO. That's a side benefit, but it can't necessarily be the main driver. The main driver is we're mitigating a flood risk.
Our sewer lining projects to mitigate the I&I issues are
So the question was, can we do a sanitary sewer lining project as a flood mitigation project?
Right.
No, not unless you can show that there is a significant flood risk that would be addressed through that sanitary sewer lining project. But I can't think of a situation that has come in that we've seen that be an eligible project. It's eligible under the water and sewer and the H2OPA programs. I'm sure everyone is by now familiar with the local share account statewide program, which can fund infrastructure projects in addition to a number of other things. And for anyone that's in Westmoreland County, I don't know if anyone in the audience or online is from Westmoreland County, but they would also qualify for funding through the Category 4 program, so the local share account Category 4 program.
See any questions online, any additional? All right, and we can come back, and if you think of questions throughout, thank you so much, DCED. Let me get the PowerPoint down. And then move into PennVest. So I know that PennVest presented at our conference in spectacular form. We learned a lot about their funding programs, but because they are such an important part of the funding matrix we have available to us, we asked them to come just to make sure that you have all the information once again. So go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Dan McKessick from PennVest. As Annie mentioned, we were at the conference, so if you were there, I don't want to repeat myself. I'm going to give a high-level overview of PennVest, and I guess we'll address some questions. So PennVest, what do? We fund drinking water. wastewater, on-point source projects. It's a revolving fund, so we get grants from the federal government, EPA. We have Nicole here and Maggie online. And we loan out those monies. Money's paid back to us. We revolve back out to other lenders. That said, we also do have availability of principal forgiveness for grants. Our budget approximately ballpark about $800 million a year statewide. That is inclusive of about, we'll say 240 million of the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act money, bipartisan infrastructure law. The bill money, IIJA, how that impacted us, we were able to adjust some of our algorithms to allow maybe some more grant eligibility to our potential borrowers, applicants. So with that, I'll get into the funding determination. So how do we determine what our offer? I always tell potential applicants whenever they're sitting down with me, plan on a loan. And if we get lower interest or some form of principal forgiveness, then great. But you should have a scoped project that you are going to move with. Plan on a loan. I stole a quote from someone. They said, let the project drive the funding, not the funding drive the project. So how we arrive at that is we look at the median household income of customers in the municipalities that you serve. And there is a multiplication factor. We look at between 0.5% of 1% and 1.5% of the median household income is considered a target rate. Annie mentioned financial capability earlier. So we look at that target rate, and then we look at the projected user rate as a result of your current O&M, your current debt service, and what debt service this project will do to you. And we compare the two. If the resulting rate is lower than that, excuse me, target rate, we're looking at a loan at a county cap rate. Talking to Allegheny County municipalities here, I assume all of you, the current cap rate for Allegheny County is 1.743% for the first 5 years and 2.179. It's on the back of my hand, though. Anyway, 2.179 for years 6 through 20, which is a pretty good rate. So if you look at that, it's almost like you're getting a grant subsidy every year based upon the lower interest rate. Rates can change annually. It's based upon the latest bond issuance. We haven't had to do that in years. And unemployment, if we do see some swings, it's usually not drastic. Check our website and we update this as soon as we get an update to our interest rates. So what happens if the resulting rate is above the target? If it is above the target, the first thing we do is we try to lower that interest rate down to 1%. Take another look. Did we get you to your target? If we haven't, the second thing we can do is trying to infuse some grant monies, some principal forgiveness into your project to try and get you to that target. We look at it again. If we didn't hit your target, we can extend the term out as far as 30 years. There's no guarantee we're going to hit your target, but those are the tools we have in our box to try and get you. So how does the process work? I will say the first thing you do is you call me whenever you're thinking about funding. Yes, when you come in for an application, we need as Greg said, scope project whenever you apply to us. But it's important to sit down with me and I will pull in DEP early in the process. Let's say you're in late planning, maybe early design. I pull in DEP there. We rely on them. They're our technical one. They will outline technical requirements that you need to satisfy before you apply. All environmental permits have to be in hand before you apply. And you have to satisfy some environmental clearances, potentially a uniform environmental review, things of that nature. We'll discuss other things during that planning consultation, such as potential federal funding requirements, DBE, disadvantaged business enterprise, Davis-Bacon wage rates, Now we have Build America, Buy America, American Iron and Steel, things of that nature. We'll dig a little deeper there and address any questions. So you meet with me a little early in the process, and usually your consultant will kick that off, call me up, say, hey, we want to meet for a planning consultation. One DEP, sit down with you as a borrower, and the consultant will go over the project. Once you have your permits in hand, you apply. We have a rolling, well, I guess we could say a rolling application schedule. Again, on the handout, you'll see we have 4 application rounds a year. Generally speaking, you apply, and about 2.5 months later, generally, you would have an offer in hand if the board approves your project. I say if the board approves, we haven't had to turn anybody away. We do have money to loan. However, there's always the possibility that we would have to defer someone and say, we can't fund you this round, please apply next round. The way we do that is we rank projects based upon their environmental impact and importance. And we would discuss that at the planning consultation as well. So we would rank all the projects, and if we don't have enough money during a certain round, look at the lowest ranked project and say, I'm sorry, we can't fund you this time. Please come in next round. But it's not as pressing as some other funding agencies. Like I said, we meet quarterly. So you apply. You apply, like I said, you have a funding offer in hand around 2 months after you apply. That's the point where we start the settlement process. So we have a series of 4 calls to get your legal counsel, your engineer, you as a borrower on the phone, on a video call. And we step you through the settlement process. After you're settled, you got a construction, and disbursement is made, again, online, a web-based system.
Got you, man.
I did jot down a few items that I picked up as a couple of these folks were going. We will fund design and construction. We can't cover 537 planning. So you come in for a construction application, and as part of that, your design costs are included. It's not like we cover the design up front. It comes in as one package.
Keep going.
Generally. Thank you. Funding limitations. If your system serves a single municipality, you have a limitation of $11 million. 2 or more municipalities is a $20 million limitation. If you have 4 or more municipalities, we can go higher than $20 million with a super majority vote from the. A few other items to mention. We have a homeowner septic program. It is handled through the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency. Basically, it covers first-time connection to a sanitary system, repair of a failing septic, or repair of a lateral that's going to a public system. And the individual homeowners would contact banks that take part, that PHFA has gotten into the system. They would contact them directly, say, I want to take part in this program. I believe it's up to 25 years on that loan, 1.75% interest rate. Don't quote me on it. We have information on our website. Small projects, we have a small project program. It's all loan, but the benefit here is that we've got board approval for a project that serves a municipality of a population less than 12,000 or less than 1,000 connections. If your project is less than $1 million in total, we can fund up to 500,000. So it's great for, let's say, a small project that you need a match. What we would do is you would, again, meet with me, we take a look at it, And I'd say, well, yeah, this would be a loan regardless, so let's run it through the quicker process. We aim for a couple week turnaround before you have an offer in hand as opposed to waiting for a board meeting. We fund it with state monies, which eliminates some of the federal requirements, DBE, Davis-Bacon, and things of that nature. So there are benefits to that. But if we would see that you might qualify for some sort of additional subsidy, we'd say, maybe you want to hold off and come in the traditional route to be considered for any additional subsidies. Programmatic financing, this is mainly for larger capital improvement plans to cover multi-years. What it is you come in for let's say a phased project with sub-projects. So you're going to cover a capital improvement plan over 3 years. We need X number of dollars. What it allows us to do is evaluate all 3 phases. We award the offer and you have the money in place. However, we settle on the phases over 3 years. But you know you have the money funding in place. So the stipulation, well, it's all loan. The stipulation is that you would settle on the final project no later than 3 years after the initial settlement phase. So we got to condense that into a 3-year settlement timeframe, 5-year construction timeframe from your phases. So it's good for larger systems or larger projects that are going to phase a capital improvement plan. I believe I addressed all my little notes here, but the last thing I want to mention is my cards are over here. Most important part is to reach out. Again, whenever you have a pretty well scoped project, you know, you're done planning or you're very close to being done planning or early design, we need to sit down and discuss what the funding options would be, who the borrower would be. My eligible borrower is the owner. I know someone had asked. Owner, operator of the system. So I know here we're probably talking combined systems and or sanitary. I did hear a lot of stream work there as well, but it would be the owner or operator of the system. So any questions?
Yeah, I don't see any questions that have come in online. Any in the room for Penvest? And like I said, we'll have time to afterwards for mingling cards.
I have a
and-
question.
Yes, yes.
And I'm sorry, Greg, for calling you. And I've gotten a couple questions with regard to match.
Yeah.
I heard you say that the commitment for the match for you would be in the form of an offer, I'm guessing.
Yes.
In lieu of an offer from us, I imagine they can commit a match and then still come in to us
Yeah,
to cover those funds.
yeah, great question. I'm not gonna necessarily hold you to the specific source of match if it's just something that's being committed to get the project across the finish line. We've had projects in the past come in with a term sheet from, you know, their local lending institution where, you know, the interest rate may not have been super favorable, but we could at least see that there was some line of financing in place or the potential to be in place that the level of match is there. But that could be replaced by another grant, Penvest loan, USDA loan, Growing Greener, basically any other source of match that meshes with our program.
Thanks, Greg. Sorry for
No, you're good.
calling you out there, but
Took away my facilitated question at the end of the meeting.
Yeah,
It was
well, I
about the
guess we'll-
overlap of all of these grants and how a lot of them are allowed to be the match for each other. So
right, we do a good job. That's trying to match other funding
Yes.
sources.
I don't see any questions in the room, so we're going to have our last of the state agencies, so DCNR. Let me get the PowerPoint up for you, and if you want to go ahead and get started, I'll have it up in just a second.
Okay, so I'm Celine Colbert. I work with DCNR as a watershed forestry specialist. So thinking about riparian buffers and lawn conversions. But here I'm kind of stepping into a different role and helping out Adam Mattis, that many of you might have worked with him with our Bureau of Recreation and Conservation. So we funnel a lot of our watershed forestry money through this program, along with a lot of urban and community forestry money. But this is also an opportunity if any of your projects overlap with some recreational needs, or maybe a pipeline, could be a trail as well. Good opportunity to think about how projects that you have to do could match projects that you want to be doing. So you're good. Look ahead when you have a chance. So these are DCNR grants available through the Bureau of Recreation and Conservation. Sorry, there is a lot of clicking in this. I stole Adam's slides and that's the way they are. But a little bit of information about the dates. So it is a spring grant round, so it'll open in January. The webinars that were hosted in November are posted online if you have questions or kind of want to see what projects might qualify. And then these would be implemented into 2024. So definitely be planning ahead with these asks. You can go ahead. So our priorities, we are very focused on conservation and recreation, and that will show through. So if there's anything that can relate to our SCORP, our recreation plan for the state, that's wonderful. Go ahead. There's a lot of clicking on the side. So if you just want to click. Basically, as a municipality, you are an eligible applicant. Some of our money can be used on private land. So if we're thinking about riparian buffer, you could accept it, but then implement some of these with landowner agreements on private land. So that could be something that's helpful. Go ahead. Matching funds, there's a little bit more clicking. So for a lot of these grants, it does require a 50-50 match, but the community and watershed forestry only require a 20% match currently, and we are trying to knock that down even lower. So that's something to keep in mind. This is a new lane, if you're familiar. It was available in this past fall round, which was kind of a unique round, but this is the first time it's in the normal spring round. And that's what I really want to focus on, but just pay attention to some of those match options as we're thinking of how we can kind of overlap some of the funding. If you want more information, it is on our DCNR homepage under that leaf that says grants. And then our regional staff person for Allegheny County, it is Adam Mattis. Kathy retired and they're still working to fill that. So feel free to reach out to him. And okay, so these are kind of all the different lanes that the grant funding can come in. So a lot of it is focused on recreational goals, including trails, playgrounds, as well as land acquisition. So maybe that would tie into a project and you could use some matching funds. But what I really want to talk about is the community and watershed forestry, which is urban forestry. So thinking about any individual trees that you want to manage. As we're doing a lot of these projects, you're going to be digging up a lot of tree roots. So if you want to replace trees or even think about managing the trees, we can be really flexible with this funding. It's not just to put trees in the ground, but some tree preservation could be part of it. If you want to hire a consulting arborist to be on site as you're digging up these lines right underneath trees and determining whether this is a tree that we can save or if this is something that's going to need removed because that root damage is just too severe, that would be a unique and fundable idea with this money. As far as the watershed forestry side of it, we're looking at lawn conversion. So taking anything that's mowed grass and turning it into a forest or a meadow. So that could be a little bit of that stormwater credit, getting rid of that. And then the riparian forest buffers. So that's within 300 feet of a stream, any tree plantings that you want to do. So that could be something that you do because you did that stream bank restoration and that's the next step of it. It could be something that you had to remove that pipe, but now you need something back in that spot. So definitely look for opportunities. This is money that can be used as far as the lawn conversion, riparian forest buffers on all landowning types. So it doesn't have to be just public land. The Tree Vitalize money, the kind of urban and community forestry is within the public land, but it's not just putting trees in the ground. It is putting trees in the ground, which is always great. But if you have some needs that go hand in hand with this for bigger planning efforts around it or bigger tree care and preservation goals, then definitely look at this as a potential funding source. So we do have, like I said, the recorded webinars are online if you have questions about specifics, as well as more information on the grant program. If you have a project and you wonder if it would be a good fit, Adam can definitely handle all of this money would it count as match or that sort of thing. Whereas I'm happy to answer anything about technical, these species would be good, or this is a wide enough buffer, or anything on the ground a little bit more. So those are the deets and our contact information. There's also fact sheets available with the different categories as far as that lawn conversion, riparian buffer, and tree vitalize. But there's a minimal ask of $50,000, but it could be a combination of all three. It doesn't have to be 50,000 in buffer. I will caution you if you are considering riparian buffer. We've gotten some applicants that are putting tons of money into like $100,000 for a 1 acre buffer. Sometimes engineers will come up with those plans. Those are not going to rate high as far as our funding and probably not get funded. So be very willing to reach out to Adam or I to review any plans that you had drawn up as far as the buffer design. We can definitely work with you. Different entities, maybe the Conservation District will talk, but they're into buffers too. So maybe they're a good person to reach out to as well. Yep.
One of the things that will come up quite a bit in the consent order agreements will be the idea that you're looking for the land often to do the projects that will be necessary to manage the source control. And as you're doing the overlays that we saw for green infrastructure planning and location, sometimes those happen to be in your neighborhood parks, in your neighborhood community areas, in your forests. And so the DCNR grants, although they may seem, you probably weren't thinking about playgrounds when you walked in here today, but the idea that there are all sorts of projects that could be a part of source control that occur in the parking lot for that playground underground that then solve some of the problems for your sanitary line. So some of those overlaps are, like I said, we're hoping to be creative with what funding's available in the region. I didn't see any questions come in online. Any questions in the room for DCNR? All right, so we're going to switch gears now to the county level. We have funding federal, state, and so Tim and Alkazan, I'm going to invite you to get started, and I will bring up your PowerPoint now.
Thanks, Annie. Most of the folks in the room in front of me have participated in the GROW program. I'm assuming several folks who are online have also participated in the grant program. So I'd like to focus this presentation not so much on everybody who's already participated. This is going to be old news to you, but to the panelists, because what you guys have to offer to the customer municipalities is a means to supplement their contribution to the GROW program, where we do not have a fixed program. We have a variable match, and I'll get into that a little bit later. And when you see it, when I pause, that'll just mean. So over the years, there have been challenges to source controls, property ownership, private, municipal, generally not Alcosan. Jurisdictional problems that we've always historically had, which have been greatly improved over the past several years between the various municipalities. Alcosan has 83 customer municipalities. Allegheny County has 140 municipalities, so we're pretty disjointed. We're starting to work together. The age of the infrastructure being roughly about 100 years old now. And the region's topography doesn't make for very easy solutions for source controls. So Alcoasand wanted to put together an incentive program to help the municipalities do source control projects because that met one of our major goals, and that's to get the water out of the system. Some of the key things municipalities had to own and operate the projects. It had to be fair amongst all 83 communities. We had to do our best to find projects that met both combined sewer communities and sanitary sewer communities. And then one major thing that we wanted to be, what we felt was different from other programs similar to ours, was we wanted to monitor this performance so that we can learn from the projects. Not all projects are great, not all projects are bad. We wanted to start understanding what makes a successful project. And as subsequent cycles move on, we can hone in on those successful types of projects. And finally, Alcoasand we could not use bond money. We had to utilize ratepayer funds. So this is all operating account money.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so there's two main objectives. The primary objective, which will get you 85 to 25% match, is reducing sewer overflows. The secondary match, which will be from 25 to 15%, is how much water are you able to get out of the system. Whatever match is higher, that's the match we'll offer. We're trying to find projects that will help the municipalities meet their regulatory requirements. That was from cycle 1 to now more than ever. Now all the municipalities are under consent order agreements. And to meet those agreements, they have to try to attain some flow reduction targets. Our program will fund design work and construction related to these source control projects. Payments are only made as reimbursements. So you could design everything, but we will not start reimbursing until construction has begun. Once construction begins, we get that first contractor invoice. We'll take a look back to all the design work that took place prior to that. Every pay application, we hold back 15% of that money, so that at the very end, we get that final report, and that's the last payment back to the municipality. Okay, so the project requirements, when we get an application or a letter of interest, when this project begins, the project has to demonstrate that it's going to be successful from the get-go. So it has to demonstrate that it can reduce sewer overflow volume. Absent that, it has to at least demonstrate that it's going to get rid of water coming through the system. Pre and post construction monitoring are a requirement. Absolutely, you have to have some level of monitoring. Post construction monitoring is requirement if a project's already done and they're just seeking reimbursement for everything, or after the construction of the project, do the post construction monitoring. Now, there are minimum design requirements depending upon budget. If it's less than $1 million, it has to be at least at 60% design. Greater than $1 million, it has to be at 90% design. The reason why we have to do this is we have to be sure that when we offer funds to a municipality, that we have some assurances that the project will get built. The municipality, again, has to establish that they have property interests in the site. Typically, this isn't a big deal because sewers are within the public right-of-way. But the property interests apply more to any stream jobs that are done or any green infrastructure projects that are done. And the key thing, the thing that allows us to offer this funding is that each municipality signs an agreement saying that for a minimum of 20 years, we will maintain and operate this project. So we get applications every year. Once a year, we get applications. Right now, we're currently trying to find projects to apply for this job. When we do get applications, we've gone through 7 cycles, and what is on the screen is through the evaluation of these projects, we've estimated that there's been over 200 million gallons of overflow reduction. and almost 1 billion gallons of water taken out of the system through these 7 cycles. With the help of my panelists, we can make this a lot more. Keep going in. Right now, we have 83 municipalities. Hey, Andy, can you step back one bit? It's okay. We have 83 communities. 67 have participated in some level right now. So we have 16 that have not yet participated. We're working on it. But almost every municipality and pretty much every municipality that's in the Alcoasand service area in this room, just about everybody has participated in the program. Next slide. Of those 67, 52 have received awards, and of that, all that money, 54% has been Alcoasand match. The other 46% municipal match. And we do not have a whole lot of criteria as to what counts as municipal match. We love it when we have a project where the municipality pays virtually zero into the project and that other grants and other opportunities have funded most of the job. Because, Annie? Municipalities in Alcoasand made a commitment to invest $125 million in municipal and wastewater infrastructure. That was what, when Alcoasand came in, we wanted to incentivize the municipalities. I don't know that the municipalities wouldn't have done these jobs, but I do believe that the municipalities have been pushed further quicker by the fact that Alcoasand had this program put together. Next one, Andy. Cycles 1 through 6, Alcoasand was basing all of our evaluation on existing conditions. And what that means to the panelists is that what is here, right now, we looked at those conditions. Cycle 7, we had to shift gears because Alcoasand is currently in a $2 billion expansion of our treatment process. No worries, Annie. So because that $2 billion and the plant is starting, the tunnels are going to start, we had to take a look at, okay, what is this program? What are these projects going to look like as these interim wet weather program projects are completed? That way we have to start focusing our attention on the areas that may not be getting impacted so much by the interim wet weather plan. That's okay.
I couldn't find who that person is, so just for those of you joining us online, keep being patient and fine.
That's okay. Go back one.
And
What you see on the slides is the difference on the left-hand side. That was existing conditions, and the greener your area was, the more probability that if you took, say, 100 gallons of water out of the system, that a high percentage of that water would result in a sewer overflow reduction. But because of the plant expansion, because of the tunnels that are going in, you can see on the right that you lose a lot of that impact. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to hone in on those areas where we still have a reasonable impact, because those areas that you see that still have something left, those areas aren't going to get addressed until the next phase of our clean water plan. Right now, we're spending $2 billion, but that wasn't enough. So we had to split this into 2 programs. The interim wet weather plan is what we're doing now and what we learned from what we've built, and then we finish the job years from now. So that's where growth is moving forward. As I mentioned before, we monitor, we look at performance. As of when the slide was made, we had 72 projects that were done with final reports and data for most of these projects. For the most part, most of the projects are performing as predicted. there was a significant number that were overperforming, way beyond what we were anticipating, and a small percentage that was underperforming. This gets to how we evaluate our projects. We made it very clear to our municipalities that we base this on very conservative estimates, and your match is based on those conservative estimates. And then when the project is actually done, it absolutely, most of the time, they perform a lot better than anticipated. This way, we know that we're going to, that we have a fair assurance that these projects are going to be meeting our expectations and are successful for the region. Last slide, Annie. So my panelists, please, I really want to have you guys help the municipalities. So if you have any questions about GROW, please reach out to me. I've got all your contact information, and I'll be sure to reach out to you. Already I've spoken with some of the organizations here, but I really would hope that the municipalities watching starts to take advantage of all the funding that is available. And if there are any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Okay, what are the lessons learned from 30% under projects like contributors, why they're not?
The question was for the small percentage that were underperforming, what was typically the reason? Sometimes the reason is, you know, we may have just overestimated what the impact was going to be. Some of them were green infrastructure projects. Some of them were I&I projects that maybe the data that we received initially wasn't working out. And keep in mind that when we say underperforming, it's 25% under what we were anticipating. And in that whole list, there were green, you know, roughly, I would say 1/8 of the green projects underperformed, and probably 1/7 of the I&I projects underperformed. They got outweighed by all the overperforming projects. And we learned from those projects that don't perform well. Where were they located? Let's try to keep an eye on those areas. If they apply for a similar project again, maybe initiate a little bit more scrutiny to the data and make sure that what we're getting is the best project possible. You know, right now the program was $100 million. We've got probably roughly 30 million left. And with the change in how we're evaluating everything, we really want to make that $30 million go as far as possible. And my panelists here, I hope, can help. Not too much pressure on you panelists or anything.
Any additional questions online?
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Go
So
ahead.
you had mentioned underperformers. I mean, and I understand every project's different, but I mean, where are you seeing maybe the biggest bang for your buck? I-9,
Sewer
separation, green?
Sewer separation typically has always been the easy one to get the most amount of funding, but that was during existing conditions. Now, if a project now in a combined area is getting addressed by Al-Qasan's program, that sewer separation, it would still be more likely than not something that's funded. But if Al-Qasan is now anticipating capturing more of it through the project that they're building, it may impact that match. Stream separations typically are almost always a winner.
I guess that kind of leads to my second question. I've heard a lot of, you know, stream bank restoration and stuff here. What are the requirements of the order for the municipalities to, I mean, I guess.
Well, I think when folks are saying stream bank restoration, they're talking about, you know, possibly, you know, making sure that their streams are not degrading or anything like that. Stream inflow reduction for our end, there have been places where streams are going into the sewer system, and that stream flow is bringing in debris in wet weather, high amounts of flow, causing overflows, and all that debris making its way into Alcosan's interceptor system diminishes our capacity to operate at most efficient level. We've been able to get most of those streams out. And so, now it's a stream could be like a small swale that has a little bit of flow, but still going into the combined sewer system and it's still having an impact, and weather still possibly causes an overflow.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jason.
And to close in on Dan's question, to add on to your response, Tim, the municipalities are also facing MS4 storm sewer PRP requirements at the same time as we're addressing elements of the phase 2 consent order. So the funding sources that we've discussed today from a source flow reduction standpoint going to Alcosan are also the same funding sources that could fund those pollution reduction plan elements.
Right, and the reason I asked the question, obviously, I need to make sure that I have the best evaluated least cost alternative whenever I have a potential applicant coming. So I was just wondering what type of planning goes into. Thanks.
Yeah, we evaluate these projects like crazy. I'll be happy to share that with you.
Well, he really evaluates them. I've been on that side.
Right.
You know, the municipalities are really multifaceted. So at the same time that you're getting complaints about a playground, you're getting complaints about your sewers. This panel is going to keep going. If you could just bear with us, I know there has been so many wonderful questions, this dialogue. We just have one more, and it is from the County Conservation District, and she is presenting to us through our hybrid connection. So how about we test and make sure that we can hear you? Go ahead, Heather.
Okay, thanks so much, Annie, and to the organizers for inviting ACCD to participate. It's really great to be here, even if it's not in the room physically with you all. And all the other presenters, I learned so much today, so thanks for sharing your content too. So today I just wanted to take a few moments, because we're up against time, to share some of the grants that ACCD makes to help with some of the issues that you all have been speaking to today. And we know that you're facing in terms of phase 2 and MS4 and PRP planning. Next slide, please. So Allegheny County Conservation District occupies this sort of unusual space between, 100% regulatory and nonprofit. And so we have programs that reflect both. I really was only going to dive deep into 2 of them today that may be most relevant. But first, I wanted to do a short overview of several of the programs, just in case anything, catches your ear as being potentially helpful to your municipality or some of your stakeholders or constituents. And then we would be happy to have further conversations to follow up. So we've organized our programs into the idea that our mission is to protect, conserve, and improve natural resources in Allegheny County. And we do that through several regulatory programs that the delegated authority does come from either the Department of Environmental Protection in the case of Chapter 102 and 105. So those are your NPDES permits, as well as your waterway encroachment permits. And so we know that sometimes municipalities, you all have to submit those to us for some of your projects that are disturbing earth over an acre or encroaching on waterways. But also you have the other side of the coin, which is working with developers who are doing that larger scale development of an acre or over in your places. And so we're always available to help take complaints for something that doesn't sound right, to have pre-application meetings, to talk through project ideas, provide technical assistance, and come out and take a look at things just to see if we can help provide additional information. We also have a couple of regulatory programs where the authority is delegated from the State Conservation Commission, and those are our nutrient and manure management programs, where we make sure that the nutrients going into the waterway is not exceeding limits. And so that's really working in Allegheny County most closely with just a few small animal operators and mostly horse farms. So another program that 2 other agriculture related programs that you may want to know about in case you're working with larger landowners that do have some agricultural activity. So one is farmland preservation. farmland preservation is a wonderful program where a development easement is put into place, typically on properties 50 acres or over. And in exchange for that land easement, the property owners do receive funding that comes from the state. And so we've preserved something like, larger than a larger land mass than North and South Park combined. And so this is a really good program. There's a part of it that may be of interest, though, to municipalities and not just individual landowners. And that is the fact that to preserve a farm, there has to be something called an ag security area created. And so ACCD provides technical assistance to work with the municipality on that, zoning and ordinance work to put into place. But that does, the ag security area does have a conservation and protective benefit to it in terms of things like eminent domain with utility, new line construction, for example. And so if you may have any of that kind of activity or larger properties that you might want to have preserved, please do reach out to us and we can help talk through farmland preservation. In 2023, at the beginning, we are going to be having a new agricultural program coming online, and it is to install BMPs onto farms. And so the state is receiving money from the federal government through ARPA, and Allegheny County will be receiving, we're still waiting for a final allocation, but somewhere around $800,000 to make into grants to put these conservation BMPs into place onto farms in Allegheny County. As one of our partners today shared, that is a time limited amount of money that we will have approximately. So again, if you know of any farms, larger pieces of land that are having runoff, we can also work with municipal and park spaces if there is some ag activity. So really kind of just easy demonstration, low hanging fruit is maybe we'll explore something with Round Hill and county parks. But there are ways that this agricultural money can be used on publicly owned land too, if there is some type of agricultural activity happening, and the definition of agriculture is quite broad in this sense. So more to come on that early in the new year. And so we can go on to look a little bit more deeply at chapter 102 and 105. And so, it's okay to advance that slide. Thank you. So with the chapter 102 and 105, on the next slide, please. Thank you. We are looking at developing a lot of educational programs. And so if there's interest in, conservation practices, nature-based design solutions, in addition to traditional types of development that check all of the boxes in the chapter 102, we would be happy to talk through those, help identify resources. In the first quarter of the year, we have a very large erosion and sediment control workshop that I would like to invite all of you to. It's primarily attended by developers, engineering firms that prepare permits, as well as a lot of municipalities as well. And in that workshop, we cover a number of topics around the permitting activity, but also moving into some conservation. So you can find that information on our website. We are one of the largest conservation districts in the state in terms of permitting activity and work. So again, any questions, something doesn't look right in the field, not sure where to go with some construction you might be planning, we're happy to come out and talk to you, set up a Zoom call to talk, and can provide that technical assistance. Next slide, please. So this is a pretty popular program I wanted to spend a few slides on that may be of help to you all at municipalities in dealing with infrastructure on dirt, gravel, and low volume roads. So this is a program where we receive funding through the Penn State Center for Dirt, Gravel, Low Volume Roads to work with issues around culvert washouts, some landslides, things that are impacting these types of roads. In Allegheny County, we have quite a few low volume roads. And so we don't have to think about, a rural sort of country, aesthetic necessarily. There's a lot even in the city of Pittsburgh, and certainly all the municipalities around the county as well. So we can take a look at the next slide and look at a little bit more information on this program. So we have been running this program for a little while and have put about 1.8 million out to eligible municipalities in Allegheny County. Really, the genesis of this program was to look at environmentally sensitive maintenance practices. And so it's really interested in protecting, kind of stream health and where those intersections come up against roads, where infrastructure is failing into them, perhaps again, there's slides, or there is some aquatic habitat and there needs to be fish pass through with an improved culvert. We also have done, geodesign like road support stabilization projects as well. So we can look at the next slide. So this program the funding comes out of the state transportation bill, and the allocations happen across the state. We have several $100,000 annually in grant making ability through this program. And the funding is determined, again, as you'd imagine, by which counties have the most dirt or low volume roads. Next slide, please. So this program has been active in Allegheny County, again, for approximately 6 or 7 years at this time. So how do you define a low volume road? If you have a road that has 500 or less cars traveling midweek, midday between, it's very specific there in the inside slide, between Wednesday or Thursday between March 1st and the week before Thanksgiving. We have staff that can come out and help with measuring. We have all of the tools, we have the car counters, we have everything if this would be something that you might be interested in. Next slide, please. So program specs, this is the amount of dollars that go out. We have about $80,000 annually for dirt and gravel roads and about $215,000 for low volume roads. There is a 20% match from the municipality to participate in this program. And we've recently updated the local specs on this program to give a longer timeline, as well as a bigger budget overrun potentially, because as all of you doing construction this last couple of years with supply chain disruptions and inflation, we know that budget overruns are 100% to be expected at this moment in time. And so we have been able to make additional adjustments to support projects that run into those realities to make sure that they get completed. Next slide, please. So there is one requirement that's quite important to note, and that is for a municipality to be eligible to apply for these funds, the state requires participation in environmentally sensitive maintenance training. And so this program is offered once or twice a year. It's a 5-year certificate. We understand it's very difficult to leave to have staff participate. But again, it does access opportunity to these fundings that can hopefully be quite helpful. So any municipal staff is eligible to attend, but we really recommend that somebody is sent who will be involved with the actual road maintenance or, DPW folks or engineers, folks that are actually going to be involved with the project, whether it's upfront and figuring out what needs to happen, or also in terms of who's going to be involved in the maintenance post-construction. And so we do have some funding to help support participation in this training. So if mileage, hotel, meals, things like that are a barrier because you're from a small municipality, it's something that we can help to send staff to train. And so next slide, please. These are some of the types of projects that we can help with. There is technical assistance available to help in the planning phase of this as well. And so, we know that these are problems around the county. So again, hopefully that's a little bit of an incentive to make time to participate in that training. Next slide. So I wanted to keep it short because I know we're up against time, but here's contact information. Riley Kinney is our staff person who runs the Dirt Gravel Low Volume program and can absolutely walk through any details and questions. My contact information is below if you're interested in any other programs. Before I end, there's one other thing I wanted to talk about. So Allegheny County Conservation District has been working very intentionally over the last 2 years to find that, niche with what to do with our watershed programs and our staff that are not assigned to the regulatory programs. And we're very excited that we've spent a lot of the last year looking at the county and the different attributes that go into the different watersheds here. And we've worked together with several partners to public-facing partners to sort of prioritize different watersheds and municipalities. We are open to working anywhere in the county, but we have been striving to coordinate all of our programs and assets and grant making. And what we would like to do is increase partnerships and projects with many of you who are on the panel with me today, as well as municipalities, to have concentrated impact upstream and downstream on a watershed focused basis. And so our work to this date really is centered around identifying projects oftentimes related to PRP, related to that road with that runoff that floods every time that kind of storm comes, and really work together to find solutions and fundings and then get on the ground projects implemented. We use a lot of our partners here today for funding sources. Certainly Growing Greener is one that we have on very heavy rotation. And so if you are a municipality with a project and an idea, we want to talk to you. We want to see, talk through the feasibility of it. We want to see if it is something that we could help grant write, project manage. We use a number of other, DCNR grant funding sources, and are again quite, we have staff that's very good and accomplished, and for many years now have been writing these types of grants. So again, think of us in terms of that regulatory development piece. You have to work with us in some cases, but then also think with us. Hopefully, you'll want to work with us on some of this, sort of watershed kind of PRP MS4 focused work. And so if that's of interest to find out more about pursuing grants together or other funding sources on our umbrella, please visit our new website or reach out to us, and we'd be really happy to set up a time to talk. Thank you.
You know that I love a good watershed conversation, but, and I also want to emphasize the fact that we've had a lot of people talk about the grants available. And here that Heather just said, if you're sitting there thinking, who's going to write all this? Let's have some conversations that allow us to make sure there's also the staff and time available to you to go after these funds, right? So we don't want these to be missed opportunities in our region. So that wraps up the panel speakers. I'd like to first thank everyone. If we want to give the panel and all our speakers a round of applause. We sincerely appreciate some of you have traveled from far and wide stretches from, for us across the United States is Philadelphia, all the way to, our humble home here in Pittsburgh. And so we just really appreciate you being here. I hope that if you can stick around a bit.
I have a last question.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dave.
Does any of your programs require separate audits of the funding source?
Over $500,000 award would require an audit.
Separate.
Yeah.
Since this round is using federal funding, single audit requirements are going to apply.
It would all depend on the funding source we utilize, but in the federally funded would require a single audit.
This is something to factor in when you're thinking about your budget cost.
So I'm not seeing any additional questions online for the panelists. Do we have any other additional questions in the room? If you don't all mind sticking around so that just in case someone wants to come up and introduce themselves, we do have contact information sheets that we produced for this workshop. As you saw, we recorded this. It will be available on the MDS site, so that isn't publicly accessible, but it is specifically for municipal officials and those with the login who could come back, revisit this information, and make sure that they are actively working towards as many applications as possible, making our region the next Chesapeake Bay. No, just kidding. But we do have the opportunity here to fix some of these phase 2 consent order issues. And with that, I just want to thank you for everything. This is our last meeting for 3 Result Weather of the year. So the next meeting dates are on your agenda. We'll see you in January, where we'll be kicking off the year of design. So I hope you have a great holiday, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Sam.
Yeah. Could you?